I am 49% driven by a passion to help animals, but I am 51% driven by a passion for investigations. I did a case recently for Gray 2K, and it was uncovering greyhounds that were greyhounds that were they were using live rabbits to train the greyhounds. And so I filmed a bunch of trainers doing it, and they were ripping the rabbits apart alive. Now listen, that's horrific. Okay, that is terrible. And after I saw it the first time, I had just, grit my teeth and keep filming and stay focused. But when Gray 2K was saying, hey, listen, think you can get another one? I mean, the thought went through my head of, hell yeah, it's going to be fun to nail another one of these people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul, and I'm one of your co-hosts, along with Dotsie Vaush. Hi, Dotsie.
Hi.
So it's election season, and early voting is really what people are talking about now, because places are having fewer polls in there where they normally, you might have been voting before, might not be there now. So we want to encourage people to vote early. Voting is so important to me. I registered voters for 18 years, once a week for 18 years with my friend Chuck, and I'm actually going to be registering with him again next week. Because we're a little ahead of ourselves, but October 16th is the last day of registering to vote in California, although you can go into the polls and register right there and vote.
Same time. Good to know.
Yeah. In some states, not everywhere.
Right.
And if you're a felon, you can also vote in most states, and pretty much all of them, I think. And Florida, I think, they made it okay. But then, because I used to register voters and people would think that they couldn't vote because they had a record. And no, that's not true. Felons, we want you to vote. But I've also voted in every single election since 1982, except for one. And the reason is because I got cast in a movie and I didn't get my absentee ballot in time. So please, folks, if you're going to vote absentee, make sure that you get your ballot in time and vote. And if you don't get it, then go in person. Go to the polls in person.
Right. And because of COVID, because Kirk and I got our sample ballots, a few days ago, and then after dinner last night, we had a little sesh. It was super fun. It was the practice ballot. Yeah. So we went through all of the people and read their statements and discussed them and filled it in so that we can just copy when we get the real ones. But on the sample ballot says that everybody, absentee or not, will be mailed a ballot
in California, but not every state.
Just this state.
Every state is different. Some states are mailing to everybody. Some states, I think there are 9 states that have been voting completely absentee for years. Where my mom lives in Oregon, 30 years the state of Oregon has been mailing doing elections just absentee, which is actually smart. It's much cheaper. I mean, I personally have always loved going to the polls. So even though I get an absentee ballot automatically every time there's an election, I go to the polls. If I'm not volunteering, I go myself and drop my absentee ballot off just because I like going there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think I want to encourage everyone to do something similar like Kirk and I did last night with your spouse, with your mom, with your aunt, with your son, with your friends. Right. You said you and Ian used to have parties that went over all the proposition. Every single person had to come focused and educated on one of the proposition. And then we're doing the propositions tonight. I don't know if there's quite a few for California, as there always are. So that's going to be, we might have to break that up into 2 sessions. But it was really fun last night learning about all of the people that are running for like city council and of our little tiny town of Irvine. So
and it's really important, by the way, to vote on the local elections too. This is not just a presidential election.
Yeah.
Because the local elections, those people become senators and Congress people. And so definitely educate yourselves on those. It takes a little bit of time sometimes I recommend that people go to the sites that have their political penchant and see what the picks are for those outlets, those newspapers and online sites, or people you admire. Who are they voting for? If you absolutely don't know at all about the person or the proposition.
Mm-hmm. And if people want to, encourage people to get out, make sure they're registered, get out and vote, it's good to know that 100 million people didn't vote in 2016, and many of those people were under the age of 30. Yet 95% of young people are on social media, yet supposedly only 9% of them are actually getting news, hard news from those channels. They're just mostly being entertained. So that's where Feel Good Voting comes in. And I love this organization. I've been kind of, whatever you want to say, working with them for about the last 3 weeks. My cousin connected me with Janessa, the founder. So Feel Good Voting uses behavior change science where people are influenced to change by peers, role models, and indirect messages. So they are converting voters, I should say, rapidly and at an extremely low cost. So they are on, if you're on Instagram, they're on Facebook too, but I found them on Instagram at Feel Good Voting. And here's what they are saying is working the best in terms of encouraging and moving people towards making sure that they're registered and are voting. They said what is really working is kind of a challenge idea, right? So the concept is like beat my time. So you make just a quick short video that's a speed challenge to get X number of people to click the link in bio, which the link in bio is the same link, right, in Feel Good Voting, right, where people can go register to vote wherever they're living. Tag 3 friends or teammates. I'll tag my teammates from the Olympics, and then challenge them to beat you. So it just turns into, a healthy competition.
Yeah.
So if you are so compelled, you guys, you gals, you peoples out there, go check out Feel Good Voting and start a challenge.
And in some states, it might be too late by then to, by the time they hear this, to actually get an absentee ballot. And that's okay. You still go to the polls yourself. Absolutely. Wear a mask. Wear 2 if you're concerned. But I know that the polls are going to be safe. And it's definitely important that we all vote for our democracy. Yeah. So let's introduce our guest today. He's an amazing man, and we're in for a treat to actually be able to, see him and hear him too. So he's made his career uncovering cruelty to animals, and he goes by the pseudonym Pete Paxton. He's an undercover investigator. Yeah, it's a hero to you and me, right? We love these people. We've talked a lot in shows about how the only reason Americans know what's going on on factory farms and slaughterhouses, the commercial fisheries, puppy mills, breeders, is because of people like Pete Paxton.
And what we saw that changed both of us was because of the work of this gentleman and others like him. And it's the whole world, not just America knowing, right?
It's true. World. It's true. Pete has been to over 700 puppy mills, and he's gone undercover in scores of commercial kennels, factory farms, kitten mills, fisheries, all to bring abusers to justice. His work has been key in encouraging several states to ban dog and cat sales in pet stores, including California. And it has also helped end the illegal practice of selling pets to labs for experimentation. I bet a lot of people didn't know that when their pets disappeared, that they might have been sent to a lab to be cut open by experimenters and kept in a cage the rest of their lives. He's written a book called Rescue Dogs, which is amazing. It recounts his experience as an undercover investigator, yes, but he also educates readers in this book on how to be a responsible pet parent no matter the pet you get. And he also talks about adopting, not shopping, and we're going to talk about that today because a lot of people think, I have to buy a pet because I don't want to get an adopted animal. They might be, have a lot of quote unquote problems. But no, Pete convinces you in this book that is definitely wrong thinking, that actually adopting is the way to go. So now he also has this new investigation, which we're going to also be discussing today, which is quite shocking. And it's just been released about the dairy industry. So it's perfect for us. So Pete Paxton, thank you for all the work you've done, and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast.
Thank you. It is an honor to be on here. I really appreciate it.
It's a real honor to have you. Can we start off with your first case 19 years ago?
Yep.
You brought down the notorious C.C. Baird, who was a bee dealer who was selling dogs, pets to, specifically dogs, to vet schools and labs. And your efforts and this whole investigation became a very, very successful HBO documentary called Dealing Dogs, which you can actually see online now. What led you to this very first investigation where you investigated C.C. Baird, a Class B dealer?
Sure. Well, so I did that for a group called Last Chance for Animals, who they had been trying to hit that target for years and years. And I had just started, right? So I'm this young guy. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be an investigator. Okay, that sounds great, And I was learning to do mobile surveillance and doing some sedentary surveillance and that kind of thing. And when we went to check out that place, we surveyed the target. We saw what the facility was like. We located a trench where dog bodies had been dumped, and I'll spare your listeners some of the more gruesome details, but there was evidence that certainly there was abuse going on. And the thing that kicked
Pete,
all of it off.
I would really love for you to share, and you can always just say before here comes some graphic and people can fast forward. But
Sure,
I don't.
okay.
I mean, we only are living it through what we think of in our head, which make it be completely incorrect.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so what we saw was we see this facility, which is this massive kennel where everything is blocked from view from Martin Creek Road, which is already a tiny road in a small town in the Ozarks of Arkansas. Even just going down that road, you can't see anything, right? And so we're just looking at these covered kennels we're on the back of the property, and we see this trench that they've dug. And when we go over to this massive trench, it is filled with trash. And it's filled with dog bodies. And many of the dog bodies are cut open, and some of their organs are out. And there is a table sitting next to the trench. It is covered in blood, and it has a bloody knife on it. So we're trying to figure out what the hell that means and what's going on. So I went down into the trench, and I was trying to go through the bodies and scanning them, looking for chips, because we knew that some of them were stolen pets. But then I also started collecting trash. They were throwing away the USDA tags with the bodies, which is illegal, collected those, and all the paperwork I could find. So we get back to a hotel room, and we're sifting through all of this, this dirty and bloodstained trash. And what we saw was that there were these forms. They're called CVIs, Certificates of Veterinary Inspection. You have a dog and you want that dog to cross state line, you have to have a CVI. That's the law. Well, these dogs at this target were being sold to research labs all across the country. So they had to have a CVI for each one. The PI, Steve Garrett, that I was with, he's the reason the whole case happened. We're in this hotel room. We're looking at them. We're spreading them out on a table. And he says, man, every CVI, it says that a vet looked at their eyes, nose, ears, skin, every mouth, every inch of the dogs. He goes, there's no way a vet is looking at this many dogs being sent out dozens a week. And he said, I can tell just by looking at them that a vet signed them all at the same time. So I think what's happening is that a vet is pre-signing them and then they're filling out the forms. Mm. And I said, okay, well, what do we do? And he said, well, we're going to put together a plan. And I went back home, and then one day Steve called me and he goes, so here's the thing is I don't think surveillance is going to cut it. I think we got to do something else. Like you're going to have to go out to Arkansas. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I'll go out to Arkansas. And he goes, okay, you're going to have to get ready. You're going to have to find a place to live. You're going to have to get ready to establish yourself in the environment. I did not realize that I just agreed to going undercover into this facility, and there's no way I was going to back out at that point. So, the goal of it, which the HBO documentary about that case called Dealing Dogs focuses on the animal cruelty end. That's the most important end, because that also reveals the USDA corruption that allowed this target to operate like this, right? But the reason that I was there for so long was because I was waiting for an opportunity to find those CVIs, because we knew that every single form that I found that was blank and pre-signed, that was going to be fraud. That was going to be a federal offense, which is why we were giving evidence directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And it took almost 5 months before I was able to get access to the owners of that facility, CC and Patsy Baird. And I could see in the top right corner of Patsy Baird's desk a stack of those CVIs, and I could thumb through them and see that they were pre-signed and they're empty. And I just started snapping pictures. And that was what ultimately led to the target getting busted.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about how you even got to be hooked up with Steve Garrett? You had wanted to be in the FBI, right?
Yeah. So originally, that was my goal, was that I thought, okay, I was already a vegetarian, and I was thinking, like, what is it that I want to do in the world that would really help out? And I thought, well, you know what, if I go into some kind of law enforcement, I can do something really good to try and help out the world. And so I was looking into every aspect of law enforcement that exists. And I looked at the FBI, and I saw that they had this unit called the Serial Killer Child Abduction Unit. And everybody knows what that is now. But back then in the 90s, nobody knew what that was, right? And there was a book that came out from one of the people that had founded the unit. And the book was called Mindhunter. And the author, Douglas, he explains that, this is how we learn how to look at a body, and we can tell by looking at the body, the height, weight, race of the person who did it, and if they have a stuttering problem or not, right? Crazy stuff. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so as I'm reading about what he does in this unit, and I'm learning about serial killers, I thought, this is the most evil stuff I've ever heard about anyone doing in my life. Okay, I'm in. I'm going to get a criminal justice degree. I'm going to become a cop. I'm going to join the FBI. I want to be in that unit. That's the best thing I could do for this planet. And then he comes out with his second book, and he says, okay, everybody, I know you all want to join this unit, but people are lining up around the block, and we don't have that many vacancies. And so, like, everybody chill out. And so at the time that I read that, I was becoming involved with animal rights activism, and I was running into a lot. I was doing civil disobedience. I was running into problems with law enforcement with some of my activism by doing civil disobedience. And the main thing was that since I've learned on a first-hand level with my job, what I learned at the time, just through studying animal rights issues, was that the worst thing that I have ever read about a serial killer doing to another human being, similar or identical things happen to animals, but on a mass scale. The difference is that there are not people lining up around the block to apply for the job that I have. And so I said, you know what, you cannot rank either of these things and say one is more important than the other, but I'm needed in this one. So I dropped out of college and started contacting animal rights groups. And Steve was the first person that called me back and said, hey, I need a warm body and who has common sense in a vehicle. Come help me out. So it started off there.
So with these investigations that involved dogs, and specifically a CC Baird case, what were they doing with them? Was it a puppy mill?
Okay, so they had two parts
stealing
of their,
them, and okay, go ahead.
Yeah, they had two parts of their operation. They had cats, they had dogs, and amongst the dogs, they had the A license and they had the B license. If you want to breed your own animals and you're breeding a certain number, you're selling them online, you're selling them to research, selling them for resale at a pet store or whatever, you have to have a Class A license from the USDA. If you want to buy and then sell, which is reselling, you have to have a Class B license. So you could be buying puppies from puppy mills and selling them to pet stores, B license, or you could be doing what the Bairds were doing, buying cats and dogs with their B license and then selling them to research labs. And then they were also breeding a few dogs. So most of the dogs that came in, I would see them come in on these trucks, and most of them were beagles and walkers, hounds, right? It was clear that somebody had raised them in their skin and bones, and they got snot running out of their noses, and they'd been in terrible conditions, and then they just loaded them all up and sent them off for very small money. People would get paid $5 to $20 a head, and then the dogs would go off to research, and the Bairds could get paid $250 to $500 a head. But amongst some of those groups of dogs, I would see things like a chocolate lab that would sit and shake hands on command, or a cocker spaniel that smelled like perfume, right? So the complaints about there being stolen pets became a real concern. But they wanted all dogs, and they wanted all kinds of dogs, because they were doing a variety of things besides just fraud, besides just animal cruelty, besides just neglecting animals to death. They would test dogs to see if dogs had heartworms, and if they did, they would shoot the dog, cut the dog's heart out of their chest, and then squeeze the heartworms into a vial and send them off to research. And that is why we were seeing the cut open bodies in the trench. They would test dogs' feces for worms, digestive worms, and if the dogs had worms, they would collect the worms to send the worms off to research and not bother to then deworm those dogs, who would then die.
So if you were to, if I was thinking about buying a dog in the pet store in the mall, pitch me on why I shouldn't do that.
Gotcha. Okay. So, one of the biggest arguments against is people will say, well, the pet store, any pet store, they're going to buy from a puppy mill. You go to the pet store, and then what they're going to say is, no. We don't get from puppy mills. We buy from responsible breeders, hobby breeders, family-run breeders, right? Or, listen, they're licensed by the USDA, so they're inspected and they're professional. Professional breeders are commercial breeders, and they're licensed by the USDA. Those are going to be their lines. But they're also going to say some lies that are a little more outlandish. They're going to tell you, listen, the reason these breeders are in the Midwest is because that's where they have farms, and that's where they have the space for all of these dogs to run. It's all lies. Don't believe any of it. Okay. So first of all, as far as what the definition of a puppy mill is, that's kind of up for debate. I define puppy mill as anyone who profits from the sale of their dogs. Now, if you're listening to this, if you're a listener and you breed your dogs, I'm not saying you're a bad person. If you have family members or friends who do that, or if you bought your dog from a breeder, I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm sure you love your dogs. You may disagree with some of the things I'm about to say, but I would just implore you, please hear me out. Even if it's not to agree with me, at least you will understand my side and understand where I'm coming from. And you might find you agree with some parts of what I'm saying. So the reason that I'm against the commercial breeding of dogs for profit is because if you buy a dog from a breeder, a dog in a shelter dies, period. We have about over 80,000 dogs a year that are killed in shelters in this country. Now, when you have about 200,000 dogs that people are buying for pets, you might say, well, wait a minute, Pete, isn't there still enough room to get over 100,000 dogs, right, from breeders? Okay, but there's about 70,000 dogs killed in shelters. There's over 80,000 cats that are killed in shelters. So now those numbers are getting a little higher, and you're like, wait a minute. Don't we still have 50,000 dogs that we could get from breeders? Wouldn't that be okay? And this is where it gets a little more complicated. We are trying to save dogs from Puerto Rico, from the Caribbean. We are trying to get dogs out of Mexico, where they have an overpopulation problem. With increased natural disasters, we are seeing more dogs going into shelters and more dogs that we have to rescue from the Caribbean. So the reality is simply that buying a dog from a breeder does mean a dead dog in a shelter. But beyond that, if you get a puppy from a breeder, many of them will be USDA licensed. The Bairds, who I just discussed in that the investigation I just explained, they were USDA licensed. You can see my footage online. Most of my puppy mill work I do, for 99% of it, is for the Companion Animal Protection Society. You go to caps-web.org. You'll see the videos that myself and other investigators have shot. You'll see videos of us going to pet stores, talking to employees, and hearing the lies that they tell us. Then you'll see the footage of when I go to those puppy mills and I actually film them. And it's just here's the lie they gave. Here's the proof that it's a lie. The USDA will license facilities and use the Animal Welfare Act to have standards such as how much space you can have for the animals. The lighting, you have to have proper lighting. You can't have, rusty wire. You can't have cobwebs everywhere, all this stuff, right? But they simply don't enforce it all the time because they know that if they do, they're going to be putting people out of business. So they created a policy called teachable moments. Teachable moments means, let's say you're the puppy miller, I'm your inspector, I show up and I'm like, okay, so listen, Alexandra, you you got cobwebs all over the ceiling and you got dust all over the floor. Can you clean that up right now? Okay, this is a teachable moment. I'm not even writing it down. So if an activist sends in a FOIA request, they won't even get a record that you had a violation. Because if you have a violation, you can't sell to the pet store, and I don't want to hurt your business. But one of the things that we started to see a lot was that dogs have a lot of conditions that you don't see when you first walk through. I know this from dogs that I've rescued out of puppy mills. Their teeth are literally rotting out of their heads. They have horrible skin condition, right? So if they have matted fur and they have rotted teeth, you know that you have what would be a violation of 2.40 of the vet care standards of the Animal Welfare Act, or at least it used to be until under the Trump administration, the USDA said no more. That doesn't even count as a veterinary violation. So that way they don't rack up a violation and can sell to pet stores. So you're going to have, so when you have puppies that are raised in these kinds of conditions, not only are the parents of those puppies suffering, and it's worth mentioning that if you look at the Animal Welfare Act and you read through the standards, you read through the regs, there is absolutely nothing that exists in them for the psychological well-being of dogs. Something I've been doing lately is instead of just going to puppy mills and just walking through and looking at them, I've been doing surveillance, and so I'll take a camera, set it on the tripod and watch, and it just runs. And you see dogs just spinning and pacing nonstop. And it's a stereotype. It's psychological stress, right? Now, the puppies get pulled from their mothers at 5 to 6 weeks of age. It's the whelping age. That is why puppies bite. They don't learn to not play bite from their mother. They learn to fear other dogs, right? They'll fear other puppies. That's how they get separation anxiety. People say dogs from shelters get it. Puppies from breeders get it. And the other thing is that let's just say, let's say you hear all this and you're like, okay, Pete, I hear you. All right, it's bad. I get it. Puppy mills are bad. They're terrible places. And I know that it's not great for the dogs and the puppies or all that. But listen, I have a special needs kid, all right? I have a special situation and I have a cat and I need this puppy that I can mold from the beginning. It is not the case that we can use nurture to entirely control nature. If you have no experience with dogs, all you have to do is ask your friends and your family or go online and you will see the enormous amount of people that have bought puppies and then all of a sudden one day they're saying, what the hell is going on with my dog? Why does my dog hate other dogs? Why does my dog hate kids? Why does my dog hate other people, right? You cannot control that dog's personality, but if you get from a shelter, many shelters and foster-based rescues know exactly who that dog is. They've had that dog and fostered that dog. They've taught that dog to be housebroken, to walk on a leash, to sit, to stay. They know if the dog likes kids. They know if the dog likes other dogs or likes cats or likes to go swimming or just wants to be a couch potato. You know who you're bringing into your family. And getting a full-grown dog means you're then not going to have a lot of the health conditions that you would have if you got a puppy. You get a puppy, you don't know if there's going to be a congenital issue that puppy could then die from. You have no idea. You get a dog from the shelter, you know the dog's okay. There's no congenital condition, right? Because that's a full-grown dog.
And I might add that I was volunteered at my shelter for 8 years. The pregnant mothers come in all the time. If you're dying for a puppy, there's plenty of puppies at the shelter.
That is an excellent point. You can still get them.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can go to breed-specific rescues. Any breed you want, there will be a breed-specific rescue nearby, not too far, that'll have the dog you want.
There's also a scam going on because in California, they don't let anymore pet stores sell animal. Okay, I'm just against the word selling anyway, any being, but let's just say that they don't let pet stores sell animals unless they're from a quote unquote rescue. Can you speak to that and talk about the scam?
Absolutely. I've done a lot of work on that. CAPS, Companion Animal Protection Society, and other groups have done a lot of work on that. So what it is that the way California wrote the law is that you cannot sell a puppy unless the puppy comes from a rescue. But they messed it up. It was wonderful that they passed that law. It really did a lot of good. It really did help fight puppy mills. But the way the law should have been worded is that the pet store cannot have any monetary interest in the puppy. So what happened was that you had a lot of false rescues sprouting up. One of the main ones was called Hobo Canine. It wasn't even actually a 501c3. It's run by Jolynn Nothey. Jolynn Nothey has a Class B license like the Target, like CC and Patsy Baird, who I mentioned earlier. She has a Class B license to buy puppies from breeders and then sell them through her USDA licensed business called JAKS, Jaks. So what she does is she gets the puppies and she can sell to pet stores, and she says, all right, those are coming from JAKS. But if they're going to California, they're going through Hobo Canine, and they are, quote, rescues.
Because it's a 501c3? Is that how she
yeah. And so you have other places that actually are registered as 501c3s, and they claim that they're rescuing the puppies from puppy mills. And they're the same price. They're designer breeds. They're the same age. I mean, everything. It's just all the red flags are right there. And they do the same thing in Chicago. I actually had someone in Chicago even admit to me in so many words and say to me, and in Utah as well, in so many words, say to me, well, no, they come from the same breeders. Yeah, they come from breeders. We just can't give you the pedigree because, then it's not a rescue.
Are some of the medical reasons of why the puppies that come out of puppy mills, why are they so sick, and why do they have so many issues? I bought a dog at a pet store when he was 8 weeks old, and he's my Yodi, and I've had him for 14 years before I knew anything. Went to the mall to buy a new computer and ended up buying an $1,100 chocolate Chihuahua. He has severe anxiety, severe separation anxiety as well, and a myriad of allergies and issues. Then I learned, and my other one is a rescue, and she's Iron Dog. I mean, nothing's wrong with her. She's blind, so she probably would argue with me that nothing's wrong with her. But iron-clad, iron stomach, and just no anxiety at all. I mean, we leave and she's like, later. We come back, cool. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what? Explain that, because what are some of the issues? My mom bought a dog, same thing. It's severe anxiety. A lot of these dogs that come out of the puppy mills and the supposed, really small town little breeders.
Absolutely. By the way, my girlfriend's and my dog, he's also blind, and he just turned 18 today. So
happy birthday!
He's gonna have some Impossible Burger.
What a treat! That's cool.
He's gonna enjoy that. So the reason for that is that imagine that if you're a puppy and you're raised in a facility where regardless of whether or not the dogs are in cages or they're in pens, the whelping barn has dogs in cages. It's typically, almost without exception, it's that there's an outdoor wire cage with treated wire, and there's an indoor portion that has it's going to be plastic or wood, typically plastic, easier to clean, and then the mother is there with her puppies. And so in that indoor section, you have all of the whelping litters. So
and whelping means
if that means that they're nursing on their mothers, and so when you pull a whelped pup, that means 5 to 6 weeks of age, you pull that puppy away from the mother, so then you start get them away from the mother. Also means to wean them. So anyway, so if there's any kind of a health issue that would exist, upper respiratory infection, anything like that, it's going to spread very quickly. But they get vaccinated, right? They get vaccinated, they get their boosters, they get all that, but their immune systems are suppressed. They're pulled from their mothers. They're stressed, right? And then when you pull them from their mothers, for the vast majority of breeders, then what happens is they then go to a broker like JAKS, who I mentioned, and they get lumped in with a whole bunch of other puppies, and then they get put on a truck or a van, and then they get sent out to the pet store. And now they're at the pet store, and now they have no idea what the hell's going on, right? If they're sent off directly to someone, quite often they're flown. They're literally put on a plane, and they're flown to people. So that kind of an experience is something that suppresses a puppy's immune system severely, and then they're going to be more prone to getting sick. Whereas you have a dog from the shelter, and again, you got your full-grown dog, and that dog may have seen some stuff. That's quite possible. That dog may have had to escape a place that neglected them and then run around and live on the streets and then be at a shelter. But that dog, by that time, has learned, like, yo, I got this. Okay. Like I understand overcoming, these adverse conditions, and I'm happy now to be on the couch. Whereas the puppy is figuring all of that out and doesn't have an immune system developed to deal with it.
What is the state of, since you started almost 20 years ago, what are the state of B dealers, A dealers, breeders? Has it gotten better or is it getting worse?
It's gotten better, but the pandemic is making things slip. As far as facilities that sell to research labs, when that Target Martin Creek Kennel that I discussed, when they were busted and put out of business by the U.S. Attorney's Office, it created a vacuum that was not filled in. Random source dogs didn't then start going off to other bee dealers. They realized, okay, this is it. The game's up. There are fewer puppy mills constantly, and that is in part due to public awareness. It's also largely in part to laws, not just like in California, but these small individual regulations. For example, out in New York years ago, when they said, well, okay, you can sell from all the breeders you want, but pet stores, you cannot buy from brokers. You have to buy directly from the breeder. I remember going out into the Midwest and going to breeders, and they were losing their minds. They were so pissed off. It's like, I can't get my dogs out to New York from Missouri. What the hell am I going to do? I have to use a broker for that. And so a lot of them started going out of business. If you pass regulations saying your dogs cannot be on wire, they have to be on the ground, places go out of business. During the pandemic, we're seeing fostering and adoption is increasing, but buying from breeders is also increasing.
I heard you speak about how Pennsylvania lost 75% of its puppy mills because of some just welfare legislation that talked about dogs had to have access to ground or no wire cages, and this is good for a radical like I who gets impatient, like, what, you're just talking about the cage size,
right.
And it's the same thing that actually got elephants out of circuses was the bull hook, not allowing, do you agree, Pete, the bull hook not being allowed to be used to train an elephant really made it so that the circuses thought, oh my God, this is going to be too difficult. So welfare stuff can really help, even for radicals like you and I.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly does. It has an effect that you don't necessarily think about, which is that when you pass animal welfare legislation, you validate animal welfare as a concern in the public's mind. Right. And I know that there's, a lot of activists who they use the term abolitionists, and they say, no, the message has to be go vegan. It can be nothing else. And that's it. And I get it, but if they will oppose animal welfare legislation. And the problem there is that, I've seen how in the fight against puppy mills, it actually has an impact and it reduces the numbers. I did a commercial fishing case a few years ago in California against drift gill nets, and, there were dead dolphins and sea lions coming up in the nets. And they passed a law, and they didn't say, okay, we're taking your nets right now and give us back the boats. They said within the 3 years, we're going to buy back your permits, right? That's what we're going to do is within a few years, and is a mandatory buyback, which I understand why that could tick off some activists. But realistically, what it does is it allows the state to say to fishermen, we're not saying that we hate you. We're not trying to have a culture war against you. We're just trying to say that clearly you've all been lying to us this entire time, and you're depleting the oceans of endangered species, and so we're going to pay you to stop. And that kind of legislative compromise I support, because I think that in the long run it really helps out. It shows that the activist community that we're willing to work with people and that we respect them, even if we disagree with what they're doing to animals. We respect them and want to help their communities, not just take their jobs away.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to look at the other perspective. You've done multiple investigations across all sorts of animal agriculture, and we found what was, I guess, essentially kind of a wanted ad from a beef association cautioning the industry about who they hire. People like Pete, and it kind of goes into it goes into you, right, and your previous names and list of quote accomplishments. Definitely for us, they are. But I think it really ultimately kind of shows their befuddlement. And they say in there that you and other undercover investigators use highly edited images of violence. What do you say to that?
Well, we don't. Yeah, that's the main thing. So yeah, they have been. When I first started doing this, we started getting evidence out, and I'm trying to think, like the first Mercy for Animals is who I've done, not all, but most of my factory farm slaughter work for. And I did a live hang turkey case, saw some horrendous abuse, and then I started doing egg.
Hold on.
What's a live hang? Is that when the turkeys are alive when they get turned upside down?
Exactly. Yeah, it means you pull the bird from the truck, or if the case of chickens, then they've come off the truck and then they're on a conveyor in front of you, and then you pick the bird up, but you put their feet into shackles. So you have like a metal rail and a metal rail, and then those, you have two sets of them, and then they come together at a point so that when the bird's foot goes through it, it kind of hits and gets caught, and then they're stuck, so they're shackled. So my first slaughter job was doing that. It was shackling the turkeys live, and the kind of abuse, the kind of just terrible things that people were doing in the process of that, nobody expected. And then we saw it again. I worked at a couple egg farms in California, and then an egg farm in Maine. And the kinds of abuse that we saw, it was horrendous. It was bizarre. It was always something that when we saw it, we thought, this defies common sense. Why would someone do this?
Was it an individual worker doing it, or was it part of the system of that farm?
It is ultimately part of the system. However, at times it would appear as though it's individual workers, and I can explain why it is all said and done. It's not the worker's fault. It is, in some cases it is, but for the most part it's not. But when we first started uncovering that, the response from the industry was to say, no, BS, I don't believe it. You edited the videos. And then we just kept coming out with cases until they finally had to say, okay, maybe that's how it is, instead what we're going to do is we're just going to expose the investigators that are uncovering it.
Right.
And then we just kept, we started, training more people and getting more people in, and just kept exposing it. And then they said, okay, well, now we're going to pass laws to try to make it illegal to do this, right? So now it's the fight against ag laws. But your question about who's at fault is a very important question. This is critical in the animal rights movement right now, is that I can very briefly explain this to explain why when you have a commercial commercial animal enterprise, cruelty to animals will be predictable criminal behavior. There's 5 reasons specifically. Well, I outline them in Stories and Rescue Dogs to explain them for puppy mills. I can explain them. This is across everything. One of the reasons is simply how stressful the work is. Until you've worked at a factory farm or slaughterhouse, until you've done it, you won't really know. It tears your body apart. Dotsy, I know, you're an Olympic athlete.
No, it's nothing.
It's what you see these people do on these jobs. It's like, you can imagine, like, it's like your worst training day, and then it's like, get up and just get up and shut up and punch in and do it again, right? And the stress of that it plays a role, because when you are sleep deprived and when you are hungry, you are more prone to suggestion. That's why those are very common interrogation techniques. So when your supervisor says, just kick the damn cow, that's why you kick the cow, right? The other thing is that if you have a felony status, right, what else are you going to do? Right? What other job are you going to get? And it will also, so this would also apply, that goes right into immigration status, especially under the current administration. If you are an undocumented worker, or if you are a felon, and you can't get another kind of job, are you really going to roll over on this facility for animal abuse? Because if you do, not only, if you say you're a felon, not only are you a felon, now you're a rat, right? And no one's going to hire you after that. If you're an undocumented worker, well, your kid's going to get thrown in a cage and going to be sent across the border. So you're not going to do that. There's also, law enforcement corruption cannot be ignored, and it is a big part of it. And it is that Law enforcement is often, most of these places, it's in these targets, they're in rural areas. And so the local sheriff's department is either engaged in that kind of industry that you're investigating. They're engaged with the hog farms, or, like they might have a hog farm themselves, or they have family or friends who do. And so they just don't believe that, leaving a pig to suffer without veterinary care, or, kicking a hog in the face is criminal. And USDA corruption is the final thing. And it is that the USDA, whether it's puppy mills or whether it's animals for food, they handle both of those things. So to be clear, it's that the same people that exist in the same parts of the country that have the same mentality about we use animals for our profit are the same people that raise the hogs, and they raise the dogs, and they literally have the same government agency that has oversight for how they slaughter them and for how they raise the dogs. Mm-hmm. So the USDA has this dual goal where they have to both make sure that those industries are profitable, and they have to inspect them. But how do you hold them accountable and at the same time make them profitable? You can't. So they err on the side of profit.
Right. And the USDA writes our dietary guidelines for Americans. So they're a multi-talented group there.
Very busy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned eggs, and I think it's kind of one of the animal product that is the most difficult to explain to people what's really wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, no big deal, chickens lay eggs.
With eggs? Yeah, eggs, okay, so I've worked at 3 egg farms, and then I've worked at a hatchery, a Highline hatchery in Spencer, Iowa, which is the largest hatchery of leghorn chicks in the world, and at least at the time I was there, it was 50,000, chicks born a day. And then the males, discovered the males were being literally ground alive in a macerator, a machine designed specifically to grind up male chicks that had just been born that day. But with egg farms, you have this specific crime that you look for at an egg farm. And if it's a caged facility, it's that, you have your cage, right? And then the floor of the cage is slightly angled so that the gravity will send the egg rolling down to the egg belt to get out. Well, you also have the food trough on the other side of that egg belt, and then you have the water nipple up on top for the chickens to get water. So if you're a chicken and you're there and you start to get sick and you can't stand, you're not feeling well, you lay down, and then gravity sends you down into the front of the cage, and then your head and the fronts of your wings get stuck underneath that little gap that eggs go under. And then the other birds, to get to that food and their water, they start to trample the back of that bird. And then she starts to get her feathers worn off. She's covered in bloody scratches. And so what happens is that, now that's at a caged facility. If it's cage free, because 2 of the places I was at, I worked in both the caged and cage free sections. Those birds they lay down somewhere on the ground and then they can't get up. What happens then is that the workers go up to the birds and they're supposed to euthanize them. The way you're supposed to euthanize a bird is you're supposed to grab them by the head, and you swing them in a circle to try to break their neck. The problem is that when you do that, their feces goes flying around in a circle. So many workers, as they take trash cans and they're collecting the dead, which is the morning thing you do on every egg farm, they will collect the ones that are almost dead, and they will not kill them so they don't get feces everywhere. And then the chickens get buried beneath their own dead in the trash cans. So the go-to thing to look for at an egg farm is that you have to find the dead that are collected before they get dumped and dig through and look for ones that are still alive.
I've found 2 that way, being on a farm. Yeah, and one of them didn't make it, but the other one is thriving in a sanctuary. And she was underneath a whole lot of other chickens and I didn't realize, I thought that they had tried to kill her and it just didn't work. But now I'm hearing from you, they didn't even bother. They just figured, well, she'll die eventually.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, how do you do this? How do you work in these places? Tell us a little bit about what you've had to do to remain undercover in these places, and what does it do to you as a vegan and an animal rights activist?
I appreciate that, but one of the things that I have to say is that everybody's job is very stressful, right? As I know we take that for granted, right? But if you're an animal rescue, you have a hell of a stressful job. If you're fostering animals, if you're working at a shelter, you have a hell of a stressful job. I mention that because the way that I always put it is that, right, and it's not fun to watch it. I hate having to watch it. I hate it when it happens. I hate having to review the footage. I hate having to write the notes up. But it's that there's a side of me that I love that challenge. I know it's happening. I know that on all the farms and all the slaughterhouses, all the dairies, I know that there's horrific abuse. But the idea that they want to keep us from seeing it, that they're actively trying to stop us from seeing it, and we just have to figure out how to get past them, that is fun. So I think that's how I've done it for a while. I enjoy the work.
But there's also some work that you have to do there, which is, doing, I would imagine, living among and doing things to animals that you don't agree with personally. That must be hard.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, that's the very difficult part in undercover work. It's what's called moral injury, which a lot of people suffer in a lot of jobs. There's a lot of different people, that deal with that. I have a lot of friends that are soldiers, and I know they've had to deal with that. And moral injury is where you, by action or inaction, you do something that is immoral to you. And I'm not going to lie, it has drastically changed who I am. I've dealt with a lot from that. I'm not going to lie. But I don't want to. Part of why I like to deflect and talk about how I enjoy investigations is that I don't want to try to make people think that, it's that I'm like woe is me, that things are so tough for me. Obviously the animals go through a lot worse. I for the focus that's on me, I like for the focus to be that I'm a professional who can discuss this evidence, and I can tell you for a fact. And if you don't believe me, you can look at the footage and you can see for yourself. I think that's the most productive thing I can do.
I would like to switch species.
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
We know that you have a very specific dairy undercover investigation that is releasing soon, and I want to go through what you saw there. Again, it's an animal product, right, that comes from those animals. But to me, I feel like dairy is certainly on the high end of the most egregious and cruelest in the animal food industry, because there's only about 265 million dairy cows in the world, and we know there's billions and billions and billions of chickens, but a dairy cow suffers just a horrific cycle of horror from the moment that they're born for almost 5 years. Anywhere between 4 and 5 years is when, the dairy cows are slaughtered for cheap beef, which would be, McDonald's hamburger, Burger King hamburger. So chickens are killed anywhere, 7 to 9 weeks or so. And pigs around 6 months, and then beef cattle around 9 or 12, anywhere in there. So I've done the math, and that tells us that since dairy cows suffer for almost 5 years, 4.5, they suffer for 250 weeks straight versus what might be about 7 weeks for a chicken, which means they suffer 27 more times than chickens do. And I've had some arguments with some EA folks, effective altruism folks, right? Because they're just about the actual lives. And I think that we really have to look at not just the lives, but the length of suffering. Not just the amount of lives that are suffering. I think the length of suffering is really important here. So take us through this dairy investigation, however you want to start it and finish it. What did you see that maybe was different than some of the other ones that you've done? But for those people out there listening to who are maybe vegetarians, like we all were, that say, well, the products, they're just milking the cows. You have to milk cows,
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, you got it. Absolutely. So, to all your listeners who if you do drink milk or you eat animal products, let me just preface this by saying, don't take my word for this. Do your own research. Everything that I'm about to say to you is online, and in many of these cases, law enforcement acted on it. So, even when the prosecutors hated me, they still had to take the evidence and use it, right? So, I've worked at 3 dairy facilities. I've worked at a calf ranch raising calves, the dairy industry. I've worked at a veal slaughterhouse, and then I've worked at this facility called Erath County Dairy Sales. And Erath County Dairy Sales, it's located in Texas, and it buys and it sells dairy cows, most of them what you would call spent dairy cows, meaning that they are, 3 to 5 years old, they're not milking enough, and it's time for them to go off and become beef. So very quickly, what I can tell you is that at the dairy farm, the kind of cruelty, that you're talking about is that you have, I've worked at a farm that has 200 cows, 700 cows, and then a facility where it had 2 halves, and my half had over 5,000 cows. And it's the same crimes everywhere. And it's that you have cows who they're young, they don't know what's going on. They gave their first calf so they can milk. And then they have to learn to walk into the milking stall and to get the milkers on, and they're freaked out. They don't want to walk into the stall. So people get frustrated, so they beat them. They kick and they get frustrated when the milkers put on them. So people beat them. Or they get old. And then it's hard for them to stand there while getting milked. It's hard for them to walk through to get to the stall. So they collapse. So people beat them. When you see these videos, you are going to see this and you're going to think this is terrible. And I want to stress this. This is not the fault of the workers. I've been right there with these workers, right there shoulder to shoulder with them, watching them as they're doing this. This is not the fault of them. This is if they believe that if they don't beat those cows, they're going to get fired, and someone else is going to come in who's going to beat those cows. They know that they have to just get the job done, or because they constantly have it held over their head that they're going to get kicked out of the country because many of them are undocumented immigrants, right? So the fact that you see this at every facility, every dairy facility that there is, means it's a problem of the system. But so these cows, part of the reason they get weak is that they're having to give up all of this milk, but then it's not just that. It's not just that they're having to, have calves and get milked and have calves and get milk. It's also in how their facility is set up. For example, when they eat, say you have a cow who's walking through the grass, she takes a step, she puts her head down, she takes another step, puts her head down at an angle like a 45, and she eats. But when they have to go to the gate where they have just a bunch of corn set in front of them, their hooves are like this. And so to reach down, pressure goes to the outside of their hooves, and that hurts their ankles, right? So that's why their ankles go bad. That's why their hooves start to go bad. And that's why you see a lot of downed cows. So at a facility like Erath County Dairy Sales, cows would show up, dead cows would show up, and they couldn't make it off the trailer. Cows would become downed on the spot. It was also located next to, so close to, that if you look at it on a map, you will think it's the same facility. It's called ABF Packing, which also slaughters, many of these cows. And I went in for an organization, it's just starting, called SEED, Strategies for Ethical and Environmental Development. And they sent me in there, and the idea was, what, I'm just going to work at this auction. Let's just see what's happening. I know I'm going to see some abuse. And I did. I saw people, beating, these downed cows and shocking them continually with prods. But then I saw something else, which is what made the case particularly unique. And it's that these cows would come from all different places, right? And we knew they were coming from New Mexico. We knew they're coming from Texas. They're coming from other auctions in Texas. They're coming from all kinds of dairies. They might come from a dairy, go to another auction, and come into our auction, right? So they had these tags in their ears, and some of these tags, they're ADT tags. That's part of the USDA's Animal Disease Traceability Program. That program exists to stop pandemics. It is because there's a variety of zoonotic diseases that can transfer from cows to humans. And if you have an outbreak or you find a cow that has one of these diseases, if a USDA inspector at a slaughterhouse says, wait a minute, I have a reason to believe that this disease is in this cow, and they test for it and they find it, they need to have that tag for traceability concerns, right? Mm-hmm. So you put stickers on their sides that says state, federal tag, do not remove, and they got the tags in their ears. One of the things they would do at Erath County Dairy Sales is they would pull the back tags off. they would cut the ADT tags off, and then they would slap on their own tags. And they would do it so then they can just sell those cows wherever they want for however much they want. They could pass them off as organic. So part of my job was going there and then having to pick up all of these tags so that an inspector wouldn't see it if they came by. And I saw management removing them, telling other people to remove them. It was just kind of a standard thing. So the Food Safety Inspection Service, which is a federal branch, they're part of the USDA, part of the APHIS. They went out, and as far as SEED knows, it is still an open investigation on their end. But this is a massive concern because this isn't just about abuse of cows. I saw cows being sent onto trucks, and I was looking at the disposition records of who they're being sold to. They were getting sold to Cavaness beef packers in northern Texas, getting sold to JBS Foods out in Tucson, Arizona, to FBL Foods out in Georgia, all over the country. And if their tags are being removed, how do you really know where they came from?
So that's our next pandemic from some type of animal agriculture, and they are aware, even possibly, that they do have maybe a zoonotic disease and they're ripping the tag. Not all, obviously, but some may.
I saw cows walk off I would say almost every single day. It was 9 weeks that I was there. I was there Fridays. It was almost every single day I saw cows come in, and they walk off the trailer, and then they just keel over and they die. And a lot, and there were concerns. A lot of times people wouldn't euthanize them; they die of neglect. But one of the concerns that I really had was, why did they die? What the hell just happened? Mm-hmm. Right? Where did that cow come from? Who was that cow with? Because the rest just got sent off to auction, right? And some of them just got sent off, and now their tags are removed and replaced. So, that's a very real concern. The fact that this place has been doing it and getting away with it, for so long. Part of the reason that you shouldn't, have dairy is not just because it's healthier and not just because it's better for animal welfare. It helps fight the next pandemic.
Yeah. So you talked about corruption. You talked about corruption within the USDA, also the lack of oversight because of just they have so much to do. They're not funded probably with enough people to do it, even if they did have the will. But what are the laws that cover this? What you've mentioned? You've talked about the Animal Welfare Act in other interviews, and you say it's never really been fully enforced in something like 55 years that it's been in part of our legislation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the Animal Welfare Act, it doesn't cover everything, right? So it wouldn't cover this. This, the laws for this are specifically covered by that ADT, that Animal Disease Traceability Program. The laws are very clear. You see a tag on an ear, and it says, do not remove, federal tag, and you see a back tag that says U.S. state do not remove. You're not supposed to take it off, right? But you're also not supposed to beat the living hell out of animals at a facility. You're not supposed to be letting dogs die at your licensed kennel. The thing is that we want better regulations because we want something that we can use to enforce on places, but we have to have this realistic expectation that corruption is a part of, unfortunately, it's a part of human nature, right? We see corruption in everything. We see law enforcement corruption, and we keep asking why. Well, maybe if we just train the cops better, won't the corruption go? Now, that training doesn't make corruption go away. It's something deeper seated. It's that we have, part of the reason we want to do away with the entire system is because it's not just us and them, it's that the animals are caught in the middle of this. And so if we create better regulations that we can try and use within the system, that will help. But the reality is that it's only going to help so much is that we have civilian investigators that can go in and that can then get evidence so that these places can be held accountable. What really has to happen is that there has to be a culture shift in the way that we think about animals. And there's a couple elements of that I think are the most important. One of the elements is understanding that the animals can suffer, and that we can make the world a better place by doing things that can reduce their suffering. But there's this other thing that we can do that I discuss it in Rescue Dogs, and we discuss it in some pretty straightforward terms. You got a smart audience. Let me try and delve a little bit deeper into it. It's called teleological thinking. It's purpose-driven thinking, and I'm greatly opposed to it. I have to say that I was greatly influenced in how I thought about it and how I like to explain it by a book called Population Wars. It's written by Professor Greg Graffin. He's an evolutionary biologist. He's also commonly known for being the vocalist of the band Bad Religion. And the way he explains it is that teleological thinking asks why, but scientific thinking asks how. And I love that he put it like that, because let's just say you have someone who says, well, every dog has a purpose, right? My dog is here because my dog the purpose of the dog is to love and be loved. That's not true. There is no scientific evidence to point to that a cow has a purpose or a dog has a purpose, or that the purpose is to be loved. Because if we subscribe to that way of thinking, we have to then relent to someone else who says, well, okay, yeah, I agree every dog has a purpose. The purpose of my dogs is to race around a track so I can bet on them. The purpose of his dogs is so he can breed them for profit. And the purpose of his cows is to give milk. That's why they're here. So don't ask why, ask how. How did we end up with dogs dying in shelters while there's other dogs that are bred in a manner that works against their physical and psychological being? How did we end up with a system that has predictable criminal activity in every operation where we go undercover in, and we continue to allow it to exist? And it's because we turn a blind eye to it.
Capitalism.
Right?
And how do we have a system that pushes a product like milk that also kills humans, or meat that actually kills humans through their own health, or through climate change, or through pathogens, right?
Absolutely. And when you ask how, and you get to that, you look at the history of how that came to be, then you find the corruption, right? Then you find that, look, it's about profit. It's about making money. Somebody is making money off of this, is the bottom line. But the thing is, I believe that the solution to that is that you don't want to just say, okay, well then no more profit, right? Because that's not going to work. Yes, there has to be profit. Okay, is that people that are doing this, they're not all terrible people. They are trying to make money. They're trying to take care of their families. They're trying to take care of their communities. They see things differently than us. Again, they're teleological thinkers. They believe that is the purpose for which those animals exist. We need to be able to find another way for them to make a profit, as much or more of a profit, without using animals.
There we go.
Yeah, and there's people who are doing that, like Miyoko, who's trying to get dairy farmers to become almond farmers and
pulse farmers and lentils and beans.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Pete, thank you so much for being a guest today. We admire you so very, very much.
Likewise, thank you. No, it's really an honor to be on. I love your podcast. Listening to it and seeing the kind of people that you interview on it. In fact, I just told someone today, I was like, man, this is a real podcast. They really have some big hitters on here. I'm going to have to deliver.
And you have.
Totally awesome.
Yeah.
I was riveted every second. I could listen to you for 10 more hours.
If you ever want to come back on with another investigation, another book, anything else you want to talk about, Pete, we will have you on right away.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.